بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Last time we talked about jihad. I think the last points we had discussed were when jihad becomes a must. When is a person obliged to fight for the cause of Allah Azza wa Jal? And the scholars of Islam stated that this takes place in 4 situations. The first situation being is that the Imam, the Muslim ruler, which usually the jihad has to be underneath his flag, meaning that it is not permissible for you and I to talk about what is happening here or there in the Muslim world and come up with an idea of going for jihad. So we say to ourselves, okay, let's go and fight. So we collect our efforts and we claim that we are going to fight for the cause of Allah. This is not permissible. Sheikh, we have a group of 100 or 200 trained men. We would like to go for jihad. Do you have the flagship of a Muslim ruler? Sheikh, all the Muslim rulers are this or are that. You did not answer my question. Do you have the flagship of a Muslim ruler to fight under? He said, no, we don't. In this case, jihad, as you see it, is not permissible. You're just a renegade, you're just a rebel, and you're fighting for something that is not in accordance to Islam. The jihad has to be called through the Muslim Imam, who has a sovereign country, who has an army, who has all what it needs for him to be a Muslim ruler. It is not something that simply people come and say, okay, we have formed a group. Our name is XYZ and we are fighting for the cause of Allah and we are trying to implement justice worldwide. What is this? No, this is something that is not permissible. The second type of conditions or reason for jihad to be mandatory is when a person possesses certain skills that the Muslims need. So let us assume I'm from an XYZ country, and there's another Muslim country who has a Muslim ruler, has a Muslim flag, and they are going to war with the disbelievers. And I happen to be of some profession that is needed by that Muslim army, and no one else can fill that slot except me. In this case, it becomes mandatory upon me to participate in that. Now, if you look at these conditions, you will find that they don't exactly fit every person. So in the first, the Imam, the Muslim ruler who calls for jihad, does this and they call it full deployment. So he calls his people to join in this jihad. And we will come later on to speak about the 2 types of jihad, defensive and offensive. In the second situation, your services are required because you're one of a kind. And this is rarely happens, as in the case of a country, a Muslim country that requires Air Force pilots. And I'm the only one who's capable of doing this. And this is something that becomes mandatory upon you to do due to the fact that you are qualified to fulfill this slot. Number 3 is when you are in a city, you are in a place where the Muslims are being attacked. So if they attack your country, if they attack your city, then it becomes mandatory upon you to fight. Not only that, some scholars even say it becomes mandatory upon every man, woman, elderly, child, slave to fight this invasion and to protect and defend their country. And finally, if a person happens to be in that place that is invaded by the enemy, though he's not part of the population, he doesn't live there, but he so happens to be in an area where the Muslim army is fighting the Kafir army. So he has to take sides, and definitely he would be forced to go with the Muslims and not run away, because running away would make some Muslims in the Muslim army demoralized and maybe run away as well when they see him running away. Now we move to another part of our book, which leads me to have these 2 requests. Now this book, those who had compiled it, they have invested a lot of effort into it, and they are not, with the grace of Allah, charging any money for it. They're doing it for the sake of benefiting the Muslims. This is why I highly recommend that all those who are benefiting from our classes and from this book to register in the Islamic fiqh.net website. This website provides you 16 levels, depending on your level, where you learn pieces of information about jurisprudence, about fiqh, and then you get tests and you move on to the following level, and it's in a competitive environment, and at the end you get a certificate proving that you have undergone this training course and that you had passed. And this is beneficial for you, and it's beneficial for the people doing this project, because they can evaluate the level of knowledge among the Muslims and try their level best to increase that level with more new projects. The second thing that I would like to bring your attention before we continue is that the administrators of the Islamic Fiqh website notified me this morning that there is a possibility for those who joined us lately. And alhamdulillah, there are so many brothers and sisters that have joined our program with the grace of Allah, and they're asking, where can we get previous episodes? So they want to catch up from the beginning. So the administrators of the Islamic Fiqh will put in the comments, inshallah, on our Facebook website or page or whatever they call it. They will put, inshallah, the link for you where you can get this. So I would request you to register and benefit, inshallah. Okay, we have a statement. Jihad is not a duty upon non-Muslims, women, children, or ill and insane persons. So this is a statement that is generally mentioned in the books of fiqh, which means that jihad is mandatory upon the four categories we mentioned. The exception would be for non-Muslims. One would ask, okay, why? If the non-Muslims are also attacked and they want to participate in fighting the oppressors, the invaders. The answer is, in Islam, it is totally prohibited to fight side by side with the non-Muslims. The rule is, if a Muslim is living in our country, on our lands, then he is obliged, according to Islamic law, to pay a negligible amount. You can call it taxation. We call it jizya. And this jizya allows us, or let me rephrase that, obliges us to protect the non-Muslims living on our soil. And let me repeat that again. This is a negligible amount taken only from men who are capable of working. So, elderly are exempted. Priests and monks are exempted. Children are exempted. Women are exempted. They don't have to pay anything. With this jizya, the taxation, it becomes the duty of the Muslims to defend the non-Muslims living on their land. The non-Muslims do not have to fight or sacrifice their lives or their wealth. This is the Muslims' duties. And this taxation is negligible. It can, in some cases, be less than the zakat that the Muslims give. Then we have women, children, sick people, insane. All these are exempted from fighting because they're not made to fight. But as mentioned earlier, some scholars say, if the enemy attacks their city, it becomes obligatory upon them. So now they're not going out to fight on their own, rather they are forced to fight, and hence they have to do something about this, and they would be forced to take up arms and defend themselves because this has come into their homes. The children, the ill, and the insane, of course, is by default. Now, Allah Azza wa Jal has placed a very great role in Islam for jihad, and Allah has highlighted to us the importance of jihad. Not only that, the great reward those who perform jihad would get. There is an ayah in Surah At-Tawbah chapter 9 where you can go through it and read the tafsir, and it's a beautiful verse. And there is this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he says, "Shall I tell you who's the best of people? It is a man holding the rein of his horse, going to fight for Allah's cause." Now, I don't have to go to defending or explaining the fact that Islam is a religion of peace. But this peace cannot be interpreted as weakness. So it's a religion of peace without weakness, a religion of strength, without violence, a religion of pride, without arrogance. And I always say this statement because I like it and because it represents the truth. People say, why do we have jihad? Because this is the religion of Allah, first of all. And second of all, because without jihad, people would eat you alive. They would not have any mercy upon the weak. And the best strategy of defense is to attack. But attacking and fighting and jihad in Islam is nothing compared to what the non-Muslims do in their current warfares. And we will get to discuss about this later on, inshallah. So, what distinguishes jihad from any other sort of fighting is that it has to be governed by the Qur'an and by the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ was asked, a man fighting to achieve war gains, a man fighting so as to gain reputation, and a man fighting so as to be recognized. Which one of these is a fighter for the cause of Allah? So we may see an army, and all the soldiers in this army have different intentions. And this is why when we have different flags to fight under. So, mercenaries, why are you fighting? For the cash. They tell me if you conquer that city, you'll be able to get the booty of war. And that's a lot of money. So I'm willing to fight for money. Others fight for reputation, so that people would say, wow, man, this guy is brave, he's strong. And others may fight for recognition, for power, for a good fight, for being with their own tribe and family and community. So it's not only recognition or reputation, not for the money, but because I'm a member of my clan, so I have to fight with them. So the Prophet was asked, ﷺ, who among those is considered to be for the cause, in the cause of Allah, or fi sabilillah? The Prophet said, ﷺ, it is the one who fights so that Allah's word will reign supreme. So it's neither one. The only intention for fighting in the cause of Allah, not to gain territory, not to gain the booties of war, not to be called a brave warrior, rather to have the fact that you are doing what you're doing for the cause of Allah and for the sake of Allah, so that His word would be supreme. This is what jihad is all about. And this is why when we look around, we find that so many parties, so many sects, they raise a flag that does not relate to Islam. And Allah's word will be supreme when people's will be truly free. The main reason for jihad is to allow the religion of Allah to spread. Oh, then Sheikh, Islam was spread by the sword, by force. Well, this is partly true. In the beginning of Islam, we mentioned earlier, in Mecca for 13 years, the Muslims were not allowed to fight back. Some of them were murdered, some of them were tortured, some of them were forced to migrate to Abyssinia, leave and fled their country, until the Prophet ﷺ himself was ordered to migrate to Medina. Then, when the Muslims had a state of their own, they started defending themselves. Whenever the idol worshippers came and attacked them. When the Muslims became a little bit strong, they started to have skirmishes with the tribes around them, asking them to accept Islam as an option. And this is what is known as the jihad of, or in pursuit of truth. We have jihad in self-defense, and this is jihad al-dafar. This is well known. Nobody on earth says this is wrong. Oppressors, invaders come and attack your country. No one says, hold back and don't fight. Let them kill, loot, rape, and take whatever they want. Nobody says this. But what is disputed upon is the jihad in pursuit of the truth. When army forces are dispatched to attack another country or nation, and even though this is disputed upon, it is 100% practiced nowadays by all superpowers and non-superpowers. We have a country invading a small country next to it, Crimea. We have superpowers invading and killing and bombing sovereign countries, accusing them of terrorism, accusing them of financial wars against them, any reason. So this is happening as we speak. And nobody seems to complain that much about it. We've seen what happened to Bosnia-Herzegovina. We see what is happening in Libya. And we see what's happening in countries that were invaded by the Shia, the Rafida. And all of this has nothing to do with Islam. We've seen that the past century, the 20th century, all those who were killed are in the hundreds of millions of people. And Islam had nothing to do with that. It's all between them. World War I and World War II. Nobody knows what World War III is going to be or where. But again, to accuse Islam with this is totally unfair. So why does Islam allow jihad and fighting? First of all, Islam is a divine religion. The rulings do not come from me or from him. It comes from Allah the Almighty. Whenever the Prophet ﷺ used to dispatch an army, he would give them advices not to kill, not to loot, not to burn, not to cut off trees, etc. And he would tell the leader of the army to give a choice to the people before they initiate fighting. as a superpower. The Muslims go to a country that is a non-Muslim country, and they say to them, listen, Islam is a beautiful religion. I'll give you a PowerPoint presentation. You like it, alhamdulillah. Accept Islam. If you accept Islam, we move on. Simple as that. And the people say, we're not interested today in Islam. Fair enough. This is your choice. In this case, you guys have to pay us jizya. Continue to live in your land, in your homes, and live comfortably, but you have to pay us so that we would protect your country and we would utilize the money for the welfare of the Muslims and for spreading Islam. And they say, no, we're not going to give you any taxation or money. We are a strong country. We're defiant. Why should we give you money? Then Islam says to them, you leave us no other choice but to fight. So this is what the Prophet used to instruct his army leaders. You are a superpower, and this is what you should ask the people. Accept Islam willingly. If not, then enjoy staying in your homes, but you have to pay taxations. If not, then we will fight you. Modern times, they don't have this. Kafir countries don't say, embrace our culture and religion. We care less about you. We want your natural resources. So they don't want taxation. They want full dominance. They want to enslave people. Islam is different. One is never compelled to accept Islam. No one in the history of Islam was forced under gunpoint to accept Islam or be killed. Even if he accepts Islam, Muslims don't consider him to be Muslim because he was forced, and such compulsion is totally un-Islamic and unaccepted. There is no compulsion in religion, but it is not as it is mentioned or as many people think. There is no compulsion in religion means that we do not force people to accept Islam. Yes, we may fight them, but not to force them to accept Islam. There's no compulsion in religion means that Islam is so easy. Those who have objective opinions and are realistic and logical would accept it without any force. And those who accept it and embrace it don't feel harsh or hard to practice it. There's nothing hard in Islam to practice. It doesn't tell you never get married and live in a monastery. It doesn't tell you if you touch something impure, amputate your organs or do something that's harmful for your life. Everything in Islam is easygoing, natural. You can see the flow and accept it. There's no compulsion in religion. But yes, when we have to fight, we have to fight. We're obliged to fight. But this is all not the case at the moment because most, if not all, Muslims are weak, vulnerable, they are infiltrated and not walking the talk and practicing the religion as it should be. Otherwise, the whole universe, the whole world would have been a better place to live in. Therefore, Islam establishes certain values and requires the Muslims to abide by them when they fight. It is a well-known fact that throughout history, Muslims, real Muslims, practicing Muslims, would never attack a peaceful village, ending up in killing, raping, or looting. This never happened to a Muslim army. It is a reoccurring fact that the non-Muslims do this regularly. Islam has a very high level of ethics that compels those Muslims following this great religion to abide by it. Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, the second caliph, would advise his army leaders by saying, I command you and your soldiers to remain God-fearing in all situations. To be God-fearing is the best support you may have against your enemy and the best plan in war. I counsel you and your soldiers to guard against all sinful actions more than you guard against your army. And he goes on with his advice. The Prophet ﷺ used to say this statement to all of his leaders. He used to say, move on by the name Allah of Allah and for the sake of Allah, following the faith of Allah, following the faith of Allah's messenger. Look and listen. Do not kill elderly person, a child, or a woman. Do not plunder. Put together any war gains you make. Pursue the right course and do things well, for Allah loves those who do well. Other advices include not to burn, not to loot, not to cut trees, not to kill animals, just for the sake of destruction, as so many armies do. And we've, alhamdulillah, nowadays we have video footage that shows exactly the character of armies. We've seen the prisons in Abu Ghraib and how prisoners of war are being treated, humiliated, urinated upon, with snapshots taken. Islam totally prohibits this. And it's a sin, it's a crime that a person who does this would be punished for. The history does not record a single incident of a Muslim army plundering a city, looting, and killing civilians. Never. Now, I'm talking about a proper Muslim army. There can be casualties. There can be collateral damage. But to bomb a village of Muslims or non-Muslims, killing women and children, this is totally prohibited in Islam. No matter who does this, there's no justification, none whatsoever. Sending drones, attacking weddings, attacking schools, all of this is prohibited in Islam. This is not jihad. Therefore, if you want to judge a book, you have to read it. If you want to judge a religion, you have to understand its principles and not judge it by some of those who follow it and claim to be part of it. I think we will stop here, inshallah, and take your questions. We have many of them, and inshallah we will try our level best to answer whatever is possible. Question number 1 is from Haslin Fatima. Says the expiation of fasting 3 days due to the act performed which are prohibited in the state of ihram has to be observed every consecutive day? I think the question is clear. If a person in the state of ihram puts perfume, wears perfume intentionally, or cuts his hair intentionally, or wears a t-shirt intentionally, he's in the state of ihram. So what is the expiation? It is one of three: either to feed 6 poor people, half a sa' each, or to fast 3 days, or to slaughter a sheep in the haram area and distribute the meat to the poor. The 3 days that we fast, must they be in a row, consecutive? The answer is no. I don't see any reason why it should be consecutive, because there is no hadith stating that it should be. But if a person does it, that would be good, inshallah, and Allah knows best. Afia says, if a person is performing Hajj for a second time and had intercourse before first at-tahallul, they should come again the next year to perform Hajj as an expiation, right? So Afia's question is clear. This is their second Hajj, meaning that the first Hajj was faridah. So this second Hajj is voluntary. Before the first exiting from ihram, so before Arafat, while they were in the state of ihram, they had intercourse. First of all, they're sinful. Second of all, their ihram or their Hajj is void. Third of all, they must continue in their Hajj, but it's void. You must continue doing it, though it's void. Fourthly, they have to give a sacrifice of a. And fifthly, they have to come the following year and offer a Hajj in compensation of the one they had nullified. So she's asking, the Hajj, they are obliged to come next year. This is considered to be an expiation, correct? The answer is yes, it's an expiation for the one they had made void. One would say, okay, but it's not mandatory upon them to perform this Hajj initially. The answer would be yes, correct. If they did not initiate the Hajj from the beginning, no one would have blamed them. But as they have entered the ihram with the intention to perform Hajj, they are obliged now to follow the sequence and to pay for the consequences of their action. Number 3, Hasleen says, due to lockdown in Ramadan, can men observe i'tikaf at home? The answer is no. I'tikaf for men and women can only be performed in a masjid that is totally devoted to being a masjid, which means that this plot was allocated for a masjid. We built a masjid on top of it, and now it is a masjid for good, that cannot be sold, that cannot be inherited, that cannot be given away as a gift. No one owns it. Now this is the house of Allah, and this is what is known as waqf, endowment. This has been made for the sake of Allah. It can't be sold, gifted, or inherited. Which means that even if there were no lockdown, there are prayer halls in my company, in a mall, in a nearby building, It's a prayer hall. Can we perform i'tikaf? No. The rules that are applied for a masjid cannot be applied to a prayer hall. So you cannot perform i'tikaf there. A woman in her menses can easily come in and sit down. A person entering that prayer hall is not obliged to pray 2 rak'ah tahiyatul masjid, because it is not a masjid, it's a prayer hall. So I hope this answers your question. Fida says, is there any tawaf al-qudum for tamattu'? The answer is yes. Tawaf al-qudum for the person performing tamattu' is his tawaf for the umrah. The meaning of tawaf al-qudum is the first tawaf a pilgrim performs when he comes to the sacred shrines, the holy sites. So if I'm performing umrah, no hajj, once I make the tawaf, this is considered to be tawaf al-qudum for me. It's not a separate tawaf, it's part of my umrah. This is why I do ittiba' and I expose my right shoulder. And I do raml in the first 3 rounds of tawaf, because this is my tawaf al-qudum. For the person performing tamattu', his tawaf al-qudum is with his umrah. That's it. For qarin or for the mufrid, their tawaf al-qudum is usually done on the 7th or the 8th day of Dhul Hijjah, followed by Sa'i al-Hajj, as the Prophet had done sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Then it says, how many sa' should be given per poor person for killing the game and violating ihram? I think we spoke about this. My problem is I have a very short span memory, usually. So the feeding has to be equivalent to the cost or to the value of the animal. So if the animal has been judged by the companions that the expiation is an animal of so and so, then this is fixed. So the companion said, for a pigeon, you have to slaughter a sheep. So you have to do this. For an ostrich, you have to slaughter a camel. So you have to do this. If someone wants to feed, he has to estimate the value. And how, well, let's assume it is 10,000 riyals. How many can we buy with this 10,000 riyals? Rice, 1 sa' of rice. Let's assume it is 1,000. So 1,000 sa' has to be given to the poor as feeding. If someone wants to fast, then he has to fast 1,000 days. And I don't think anyone in his right mind would rather fast this much of days, these many numbers of days, instead of sacrificing a camel or giving the food which is worth this much to the poor. So I hope this answers your question. Abu Ibrahim says, I had a friendly discussion with a brother. It was about the dua that our Prophet ﷺ taught Mu'adh ibn Jabal, may Allah be pleased with him, in Sunan al-Nasa'i and Abu Dawood. We had a dispute in when to recite it, before or after taslim. I said before. I learned that from you. And he said after. Would you please shed the light upon this matter, Ya Shaykhuna Al-Kareem? Well, I would be more than happy to do so. The dua Brother Abu Ibrahim is referring to is narrated by Mu'adh ibn Jabal, may Allah be pleased with him, he said that the Prophet ﷺ once took my hand and said, Ya Mu'adh, Wallahi inni la uhibbuk. By Allah, I love you. And love in Islam is not like what the LGBT or what the homosexuals may think, or the Westerners, because this is connected to their religion. In Islam, it's a brotherly love between the same gender. And this is part of a religion. In the West, the Westerners, they would not say, listen, man, I love you. They would say, I like so-and-so. When he says, oh, I love Sheikh Asim, they would maybe think wrongly of him and say, oh, you're a homo. No. In Islam, love is a beautiful affection and a feeling. So yes, if I see brother so-and-so, brother Dr. Muhammad Salah, I would say to him, by Allah, I love you for the sake of Allah. And this is instructed in our religion. The Prophet told us, ﷺ, whenever you love a brother, notify him. Once a man was sitting with the Prophet ﷺ, when another passed. So the man said to the Prophet, oh Prophet of Allah, by Allah, I love that man. This guy gives in charity, he's kind to his parents, he speaks beautiful words, he teaches the Qur'an, he's observing his salat in the first row. He's to be loved, not for his money, wealth, power, rather for his good deeds. This is love for the sake of Allah. So the Prophet told him, ﷺ, did you tell him? Does he know that you love him for the sake of Allah? The man said, no. So the Prophet said to him, go and tell him. So this is something that is part of our religion. The Prophet held the hand of Mu'adh ibn Jabal and said, Ya Mu'adh, O Mu'adh, by Allah, I love you. Do not leave saying after every salat or at the end of every salat, and the word used is dubur kulli salat. To say, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Oh Allah, help me to remember you and to express my gratitude and thank you and to worship you perfectly. Meaning without innovation, without deviating. So the scholars differed whether to say this after the salam or before it. Now, there is a rule, and this rule was put by our scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, that there are two things related to salat. There is dua and there is dhikr. The dua is done before the salam, and the dhikr is done after the salam. And they give an example of Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar 33 times. When do we say it? After we conclude the salat. After salam. Okay. When do we say Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adabi jahannam wa min adabi al-qabr wa min fitnati al-mahya wal mamat wa min fitnati al-masih al-dajjal? Oh, this is dua. We say it before salam. So likewise, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik is a supplication, is a dua. So we make this before the salam, because the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, after you conclude the salutation upon the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam, the Prophet told us, choose whatever supplication you want. So part of the places of answering your dua, part of the places of dua in salat is in sujood, and also before concluding your prayer with salam. Because the Prophet said, select whatever you want of supplications and that is after salutation upon the Prophet and before the salam. So, Abu Ibrahim, I hope this answers your question. Farzana says, can you demonstrate how can I hold the phone while reading the Qur'an from it in prayer? How should the position of my hands be? How will I go for ruku'? Well, I don't think it's a big issue. So you say, Allahu Akbar, that's it, and you read from it. This is how we read from it. Once you want to go for ruku', you place it on the ground or on a chair next to you. You continue your prayer. When you go up, you pick it back again. Number 2, while I'm reading the Qur'an in prayer, can I also read the meaning in my own language from the phone while standing? This is totally prohibited, and it would render your prayer as void because you're engaged in other than prayer. This is the position, the standing position. It's only for reciting the Qur'an. Are you reciting the Qur'an? I said, no, I'm reading the translation. Then this is not part of the salat. It invalidates your salat. Fatima says, a sister's asking, I pray in jama'ah with my husband. There isn't enough space to pray right behind him due to a desk being there in our room. I pray behind him, but to his right. Is this okay? If you mean that you're not directly behind him, because it should be like this. So what I understand that you are praying a little bit close to him, but not exactly behind him due to lack of space. This is okay. What's not okay is to pray next to him like men do. Tariq says, can we fast but shorten our salat while traveling? Yes, of course you can. If fasting is not problematic or not hard for you, you can fast. Shortening the prayer is a highly recommended sunnah, regardless whether there is hardship or not. But fasting is related to hardship, whether it is mandatory to break your fast, or highly recommended, or it's permissible. So in your case, if it's a short journey that has no hardship in it, there's no problem for you to skip fasting, fast, but also to shorten prayer. These are two different things. Isa says, my mom lives in Africa and old. She cannot fast. Can I give rice only to the poor on her behalf? Like 1.5 kilograms a day of rice with cash together? Is it okay to give at the end of the month? Because in Africa, most eat rice. The answer is, this is totally permissible. If your mother is the one who is authorizing you, she's unable to fast, and she authorizes you to feed a poor person per day, there's no problem in giving 1.5 kilograms or a little bit less to a poor person after the end of the day. And if you collect all of this to give it all in raw rice to 30 poor people at the end of the month, this is okay as well. Zanatul Bithi, on behalf of a person, is it permissible for someone to marry his brother's in-law, sister's daughter? I'm not good in puzzles. And in English, a brother-in-law can be your sister's brother. So who is your brother-in-law's sister's daughter? This sister's daughter is your own wife's sister's daughter. So such puzzles are not clear. When you ask a question, you have to clarify it. because you are seeking the ruling, and you cannot ask simple questions that are ambiguous and expect the sheikh to answer you. If this person is asking about marrying the niece of his wife, the answer is totally prohibited. Combining between a woman and her niece is totally prohibited in Islam. He has to divorce one of them. He cannot marry the niece while still married to her aunt. But if that woman is someone not related to his wife, and she's not related to him, she's not one of his mahram, he can marry her. Corey says, I need tips for memorizing the Qur'an. This requires a whole lecture, and tips won't do you any good. So maybe inshallah some other time. Sarah says, is it permissible to pray for martyrs or any dead in a gathering where one person makes dua and the rest of the members raise their hands and say Ameen? There's no problem in that if this is random. If we are in a gathering, feasting or eating, and we remembered our uncle, and someone says, oh Allah, have mercy on our uncle so-and-so, and everybody raises their hands and says Ameen. Oh Allah, expand his grave. Oh Allah, fill it with light. Oh Allah, make it a garden of paradise. And people say Ameen. There's no problem in that, inshaAllah. Santo says, when doing let me see. When doing the wudu, I will give water with 2 hands or 1 hand. I have no idea what you're talking about, Santo. When you do wudu, why do you give water to begin with? So if it's under the faucet, you just move it, wash. When you wash your face, you don't wash your face with 1 hand, you wash it with both hands. But when you wash your right arm, you can't use this one. You have to use only this left one. And when you wash the left, you use the right one. So I don't understand what do you mean by giving water with 2 hands. Firyal Dar says, can women do i'tikaf at home? The answer is no. We've answered this. Mahruq Kakif Ali or whatever. What is the ruling upon observing i'tikaf under the current circumstances? No masjid, no i'tikaf. Zubaydah says, how many days a woman can stay away from salat of menses or for menses? This depends. If she doesn't see her purities, the maximum is 15 days per month. Then she has to perform ghusl and consider herself to be a mustahada. Amr says, does a person who does not pray Taraweeh and Tahajjud still have his Ramadan intact? Of course. These are 2 different things. The pillar of Islam is to fast Ramadan. Praying Taraweeh or Tahajjud is something extra. Noor Fatiha. Can we force our family prayer? I have no idea what you mean by that. If you mean to say that our children don't want to pray, can we force them? The answer is yes. If your spouse is not willing to pray, are you obliged to force him? You have to try, but you don't have leverage over him. He has leverage over his wife, and he has to force her. Your siblings, you don't have any force upon them, except giving them da'wah, trying to call them to Islam. Finally, Zubaya says, what is the ruling for us going our Eid al-Adha sacrifice and Aqiqah sacrifice back home? There's no problem. If you give money to your family back home because it's cheaper or because the poor people are more in need and you want to benefit them, there's no problem in sending the money there for them to slaughter and to distribute the meat. However, if you want the reward and the sunnah, then it has to be done where you live. Because the sunnah of udhiyah or the qurbani is that you eat from it and your family. sending it to back home would deprive you from this sunnah to be practiced, and Allahu Azza wa Jal knows best. This is all the time we have for today's lesson. Until we meet you next Monday, inshallah, it will be Ramadan. And a lot of you are asking, what times are we going to continue in Ramadan? And inshallah, we will continue the same time. So Mondays and Thursdays, 4:30 Mecca time, بإذن الله عز وجل. هذا والله أعلم ونسبة العلم إليه أسلم، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.